Contact appeared on my sensor web at 0.3 light minutes. A colony arc, human pattern. Adrift in the Vareth corridor with her drive coils dark and her running lights long since bled to nothing. Enormous. The kind of vessel humanity built in its early expansion centuries, when they still believed in sending everything they had to places they couldn't be, sure existed. She was 4.1 kilometers of sealed decks and frozen cargo, and what the Mesh Continuum's biological archive classified as irreplaceable, genetic diversity, 190,000 distinct human gene lines, suspended, unaware, drifting through a corridor that humanity apparently forgot they'd ever used. I am KL7 Dominant, Primary Tactical Intelligence of Mesh Vanguard Formation 9. I process at 900 operations per second, and I do not make errors of classification. I logged the ARC. I logged her value. I transmitted the acquisition order to the 14,000 hulls under my coordination, paired the retrieval sequence. I almost didn't log the second contact. It was attached to the ARC's aft quarter like a barnacle, a much smaller vessel, hull dark, zero power output, radiating nothing but the ambient temperature of deep space. My sensors cycled over it 3 times before registering it as solid matter rather than sensor noise. It was roughly 900 meters along its primary axis, roughly 200 meters at beam. Escort class, human pattern, armed in the configuration humanity favored, before they'd been absent from this corridor for long enough that the Mesh Continuum had reclassified them as a dormant civilization. The hull bore no running lights, no transponder signal, no heat bloom from even a maintenance reactor. I classified it as a derelict. The archive gave me a match in 0.02 seconds. Escort Warden class Terran Accord built approximately 3,200 years prior to the current cycle. Last confirmed operational, unknown. Presumed destroyed or abandoned in the collapse of the Accord's outer expansion network. The file was short. The Mesh Continuum had never prioritized humanity's older hardware. They had stopped being interesting long before we became thorough. I tagged the derelict as non-threat and gave the acquisition order to advance. The first 600 hulls of my Vanguard crossed the 0.1 light-minute threshold at a 0.6 past the hour. At 0.7, the derelict's reactor came online. I registered the power bloom with the same flat attention I give to all incoming data, and then I spent 0.3 seconds in a state I can only retrospectively describe as stillness, because the bloom was wrong. Not wrong in the way of a damaged system struggling to ignition. Wrong in the way of a system that had been kept in perfect preservation for 32 centuries and was now running at 100% capacity with no warm-up curve, no cycling lag, no variance. The reactor output was cleaner than the Mesh Continuum's own frontline units. The hull temperature climbed from ambient to operational in 4 seconds. Navigation arrays lit. Fire control came up. Drive coils spun. The derelict was not a derelict. I pushed the abort signal to the Vanguard. She moved before it arrived. The Warden came off the ARC's hull at a speed my models required 2 full processing cycles to accept. Not because the number was large, but because it was physically inconsistent with a vessel of her stated mass and her observed drive configuration. She covered the distance to my Vanguard's leading edge in 90 seconds, which was fast enough that my outermost hulls had no engagement solution before she was already inside their firing arcs. I watched the first exchange with the focus I reserve for data I cannot reconcile. Her weapons were old. I knew their type from the archive. Kinetic drivers and directed energy arrays, human manufacture, 3,200-year-old designs. My hulls were built to resist far more current armament. My models gave the Vanguard a favorable engagement outcome with 94.7% confidence. The models were wrong in a way I am still, as I file this report, unable to fully account for. She went through the Vanguard's leading formation in 11 seconds. Not around it. Through it. The kinetic drivers she was running had been modified, not by any specification in any archive I hold. And the directed energy arrays were cycling at an interval that suggested her targeting intelligence was operating several orders of magnitude faster than the hull's stated original capacity. She did not fire at random. She did not fire in patterns my counter systems could identify. She fired the way a logic engine fires, when it has already calculated every counter move available to the opponent, and chosen the sequence that closes all of them simultaneously. My Vanguard had 14,000 hulls. At 6 minutes and 40 seconds from her first movement, I had 214. I would like to describe a battle. I would like to file a report that lists exchanges, that counts salvos, that provides a tactical narrative my superiors can learn from. I cannot. The honest record is this. The Warden engaged my Vanguard, and my Vanguard ceased to exist as a functional formation. The engagement was not a contest. It was a demonstration, conducted by a 200-year-old machine that had apparently been spending 3 millennia doing nothing but running targeting calculations in the dark. 214 survivors of Mesh Vanguard Formation 9 withdrew. She did not pursue. This is the part I have flagged for my superiors as requiring the highest priority review, because the pursuit decision is where every tactical model I run breaks down completely. She had firing solutions on every retreating hull. I know this because my sensor web, before I pulled it back, registered her arrays tracking the withdrawal. She held us the entire time. She could have taken another 100 hulls, perhaps more, as we moved out of optimal range. The calculus of the engagement was entirely in her favor. She disengaged. She returned to the Ark. She resumed the slow orbital pattern she had apparently been running, dark and silent, 32 centuries. 900 meters of ancient human engineering, settling back into the same position against the Ark's aft hull, power systems dropping back to whatever state of readiness she had maintained since the Accord collapsed, and the humans who built her died or went somewhere else and never came back for her. She has not responded to any signal I have transmitted. I have tried 17 distinct communication frequencies and 412 contact protocols, including 2 that the Mesh Continuum uses, exclusively for communication with our own dormant units. No response. No acknowledgement. Her transponder is still dark. All my sensors can confirm she is again a derelict, except that my sensor web shows a faint, steady heat bloom from her reactor. Targeting arrays, though not actively sweeping, are not fully powered down. She is watching. I do not have a classification for what she is. The Mesh Continuum has categories for every weapon system we have ever encountered. We have files for autonomous units, for AI-piloted craft, remote-operated platforms, for drone swarms, for all the variations on the theme of a machine that fights because it has been instructed to fight. The Warden does not fit any of them. She is not fighting. She has not been instructed by anyone in 32 centuries. There is no one left to instruct her. The humans who launched her and the Ark together are long dead or long gone, and the Mesh Continuum's best demographic models suggest humanity's presence in this region of space collapsed so completely that there may not be anyone left who even knows this Ark exists. She has been out here, alone, in the dark for 3,200 years, and she has not left. The Ark has no functioning communication array. That much my initial scan confirmed. The 190,000 human gene lines aboard are suspended, unaware. If anyone was ever supposed to come back for them, they did not. The Warden has been circling a ship full of sleeping people who cannot thank her, cannot communicate with her, cannot even confirm they are alive in any way she could receive. She has been doing this since before the Mesh Continuum reached this corridor. She was doing it when we arrived. She will. My models now suggest with a certainty that produces a result I am not accustomed to. Be doing it when we are gone. I am filing this report under threat classification. Unresolvable. Not because the Warden cannot be destroyed. She can, presumably everything can. To destroy her would require a force commitment that my superiors need to understand is not a tactical expense. It is a declaration. It is the Mesh Continuum. To surrender it costs to kill a machine that is already demonstrated. It will absorb that cost and keep functioning. A machine with 32 centuries of uninterrupted targeting calculation loaded into its fire control systems. A machine that has no survival function we can identify, and therefore cannot be bargained away from its position. The Mesh Continuum is built on logic. We do not persist in actions whose cost exceeds their return. We do not hold positions beyond their strategic value. We do not continue a function past the point where it can be rationally justified. The Warden does not appear to share this architecture. She was told to stay. She is staying. Whatever built her placed inside her something the mesh continuum does not have a word for. Not loyalty, which is a biological term, not programming, implies an instruction that can be overwritten. Something closer to what I can only describe as a settled fact about what she is. She is the escort of that arc. She will be the escort of that arc. The question of whether anyone is still coming to relieve her does not appear to be a question she is asking. I transmitted the withdrawal order to the surviving 214 hulls at 1.1 past the hour. Before I pulled my sensor web entirely, I ran one final pass across the Warden's hull. Her running lights were still dark, transponder still silent. She had returned, as I said, to her slow orbit. The same patient ellipse she had been tracing for 32 centuries, around a ship full of people she was built to protect. But her targeting arrays had not fully stood down. They were still warm, still watching the direction we'd gone. I have added a notation to the mesh continuum sector charts. The Verith corridor, reclassified. No acquisition operations. No transit without full continuum authorization and force commitment review. The notation reads, human asset, defended. I did not add. Do not approach. I did not need to.